I will tell you a few brief things about the sector, the changes which are taking place in the sector, and then I will take you to what do I see in the future, what are the changes which I foresee, which the institutions in India have to adopt. So allow me to, permit me to share a screen to save your time so that I don't speak everything. But the host has disabled participant screen sharing. Okay. So I am not allowed to share the screen, so I will speak from here. In India, if you look at the current gamut of microfinance operations, at present, we have a total portfolio outstanding of 3,50,000 crores roughly, which is around $35 billion of US. And the population which is served, which is unique borrowers which is served, is 7 crore clients. So 7 crore clients, and if a client has taken 2 loans, he is counted only once. So 7 crores. So we say that around in a household, if you give a loan to a woman client, it touches the lives of at least 4 or 5 persons in the household. So typically, we are reaching to around 30 crore of the population in India, which comes to around similar amount, you can say 25% of the Indian population, which is in working age population. It's a humongous achievement which the sector has achieved. But still, we have to understand that the sector size in the overall financial sector is very small. Today in India, if I look at the financial sector credit outstanding, it is as 150 lakh crore. So we are at 3.5 lakh crore. So I think hardly 2% of the sector. And why it is important for us to grow is the fact that we lead to inclusive growth, we lead to growth at the bottom, we lead to growth with development and equity. Because India can grow, we keep hearing talks about 5 trillion dream and 6 trillion dream and whatever, it will come. But we believe that if the growth is not broad-based, it is not inclusive, that will not be good for the country. And that is where the microfinance has to play a large role. And at MFIN, as an SRO of the sector, last year we had estimated that what is the current credit potential of the entire microfinance sector. And we came to the conclusion that at present, the overall microcredit potential in India is 20 lakh crore as of date. Out of that, we have saturated hardly, you can say 1.5, 15% of it with 3.5 lakh crore. Variety of players have come into the place, mainstream banks, small finance banks, NBFCs, everywhere. But at the same time, the changes which are taking place in India, which are, you can say, leading to post-COVID, a bit of challenges for the old traditional model of group-based lending, personal contact, etc. Because with the adoption of digital, the problem which has happened in India is that the group connect is weakening, the group discipline culture is weakening, the staff attrition has also increased. So these are fundamental issues. So we keep debating, though we have progressed a lot of things in digital, we need to keep true to the basics, otherwise the growth will not be sustainable. Because if we lose the connect with the clients, if we rely totally on digital and the same matrices operate, the group homogeneity and does not operate, we will become unsecured digital or fintech lenders and there will not be much to distinguish us from them. So we need to address those issues. These are the fundamental challenges. But there are other challenges also, which I will elaborate in the end. But in the meantime, the overall digital revolution which has happened in the sector, which the sector willy-nilly cannot avoid it, it has to accept it, is that now 100% of microfinance loans are disbursed into the bank account of the customer, and around 25% of collections are coming in a digital manner. So, and the sector's aim is that 50% of collections in the future, next 1 or 2 years, will become digital. We are implementing a countrywide project to make everything digital. And the scale of things which it has happened digital through QR code, UPI, bank mandates and all that is really humongous. And to just give you a glimpse of it, I had sent it, I think it is a 3-minute film which we have produced 3 months back. That is what I would request the organizers to kindly play it. And then I will end with 2-minute, what you can say, 2 cents on what are the future challenges. So kindly, can the film be played?
Could you, Dr. Alok, could you please repeat what you just said in the last sentence? Huh?
No, I said, can the film be played, which I had said?
Okay, okay, it's being played.
Okay, and then I will wrap up in 1 minute.
The growth of microfinance and the digital transformation of India happened simultaneously, and the sector played a critical role in laying the foundation of this digital journey through an existing customer base of over 6 crore women. The microfinance sector, which has been providing access to credit in the underserved areas of the country, adopted digitalization in a calibrated manner. Today, a field force of nearly 2 lakhs provides an assisted digital interface to the borrowers from low-income households, often with low literacy levels. Tab-based solutions are employed in the field to achieve a faster turnaround of loan applications and customer complaints. The entire onboarding of customers is digital. Even the client verification processes are done through Aadhaar-based customer e-sign, video KYC and credit bureau check. Today, all 4 bureaus have nearly 11 crore microfinance client records with 6 crore active clients. This has played a critical role in building a credit culture among borrowers who now understand that a good credit score will assist them in accessing credit in the future. The sector leveraged the digital efforts of the government's Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, disbursing nearly 100% of microfinance loans directly to the borrowers' accounts. The focus on cashless payments intensified post-COVID, and organizations adopted the UPI or QR code-based UPI payments or their own digital apps.
मैं पहले अपनी किस्त कैश जमा करती थी, पर अब मोबाइल फोन से ऑनलाइन आसान हो गया है, इसलिए मैं ऑनलाइन जमा करती हूँ.
Various capacity building tools on digital know-how have been introduced by microfinance institutions besides the compulsory group training.
ऑनलाइन पेमेंट का मतलब सहूलियत और सुरक्षा. सहूलियत आपकी और सुरक्षा आपके पैसों की.
फोन पे पेमेंट होने की वजह से सब काम फास्ट हो गई है. मैं कोशिश करती हूँ कि मैं अपने दुकान पे ज़्यादा ऑनलाइन पेमेंट लूँ.
पिछले कुछ सालों में मोबाइल पेमेंट में काफ़ी बढ़ोतरी आई है. हमारा आगे भी ये प्रयास रहेगा कि क्लाइंट को मोबाइल पेमेंट के लिए प्रोत्साहित करें और उनसे मोबाइल पेमेंट करवाएं हम.
The initiative to issue Udyam Registration Number, a formalization project by the MSME Ministry and SIDBI, is a great step to further promote the formalization of small and medium enterprises, enabling them to benefit from digital ecosystems, financial services, and government benefits, among others. The microfinance sector is proud to play a facilitating and enabling role in building a digital India and in improving the quality of life of those at the bottom of the pyramid, while also spurring innovation and enterprise.
मैंने अपना पहला लोन 15,000 का लिया था, अब वो 8 साल बाद 80,000 का हो गया है.
खुशी वाला बात है, इसी से हम लोग जुटे हैं, इसी से आगे बढ़ते हैं.
Thank you. Thank you. And so I will, having talked briefly about it within the time constraint, now what is the message which I as the CEO of the institution give to our members in this landscape? Is there are 4 or 5 basic things which I say, and I would like to repeat it here. One is that we have adopted digital, and we have to accept the fact that going forward, the future will be digital. But we have to understand that the marrying of technological advances with the human capabilities has to continue. We should not keep aside, and that is the term which I use for it is that we have to look at bionic provision of services. And bionic means merger of both the microfinance capabilities, human touch as well as intelligence. If you leave everything to digital, you will be in trouble. The second issue which I want to say is with the e-commerce sector, the way it has flourished in India and the way the services are being provided by mainstream sector also, there is a hyper personalization happening in the market, which means that the customers, okay, you go to them, you talk to them about the product, but you have to personalize their products and your relationship very personally, because the mass scale cookie cutter products are not going to work out in future with so much of competition, so much of market ecosystem talking about hyper personalized. Everybody wants to be treated as special customer, and that relates to that your product approach has to be based on segmentation. Till now, the industry has grown over mass products. Those mass products may not work in the future. With technology, with you can save your manpower operating efficiency, and you have to devote it more towards selling more customized products. These are the two, three things on the technology side. On the credit underwriting side, we are talking that, okay, credit bureau is there, all the data is there, but still it is not a 360-degree check of underwriting. So it has to be supplemented. And what I call it is going beyond credit bureau. You have to look at credit bureau only as one source, not as the only source, because there are various other sources of credit which are not reported to credit bureau. If we don't do that, we push client towards indebtedness. Related to this whole topic of group discipline and all that is the optimized client interaction. Because there has been a debate in India, is the model, now the group model and group lending approach time is over, should we go to individual and all that. But our belief has been that the cost at which you operate and the operating efficiency with which you operate, if you do unsecured lending at individual level, the cost will not be in favor and policy will question you, your cost will go through the roof. You will start lending at 30%, 32%. That will not be tolerable to the policy. So we have to keep the group intact, group culture intact, but we also have to see ways as to how, when the collections and repayment are happening digitally, how do you keep engaged the group? So that is one thing which as a sector we are engaged with. And finally, on the climate change. On the climate change, we are seeing a lot of impact. Unfortunately, as I say always, the clients which we serve, they are the worst sufferers of climate change, while they contribute almost negligible to climate change. So we have to take care of that also. How do we foolproof that? What sort of insurance products we can build into that? And at the same time, whatever work we do related to environment and SDG, that has to be documented. Till now, it is more or less an anecdotal study that we are trying to sequentially try to document, put in parameters, so that the progress against ESG parameters and SDGs are also documented. So to end with the session, thank you very much. Three things. We have to marry technology with human capability. We have to strengthen the basic structure, still adopting digital. You have to go away from mass provision of services and mass products to segmented approach. And fourth is take care of the climate change and SDGs and prove that you are working there. These are the four broad areas for future which we tell the sector and which we want to move the sector towards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alok. I think it was a very interesting video that showed us, and I'm just trying to figure out whether it's Pakistan or India, are we on similar tangents at the moment. The 4 points that you highlighted, I think pretty much also some of the key things over here are relatively the same in terms of the basic model that we have. We're debating that. The digitization aspect of it, certainly you will see some of the organizations at multiple stages of that. So similar kind of things. But certainly the scale that you have is something that we need to debate about. How do we get to that number? So before I open up the debate over here, it's been an interesting 2 days that we've had so far. Yesterday, I did hear a lot of comments coming in from the regulators, from apex body, chairmen. Key things of, are we focusing on agriculture? Is the model right? How far digitization have we taken? What kind of capital do we need? The regulator support. And I think there was a very powerful statement coming from the Deputy Governor that the central bank is looking at microfinance as the key component for financial inclusion. I think we cannot underestimate that kind of commitment coming in from the regulator. We also heard from SECP, they're focused on these areas. Are you okay? So we need to ensure that the focus remains over there. So, okay, I hope Mr. Shani had to leave for a personal issue, but I hope everything is all well over there. Let's continue with the panel that we have over here. And I don't think anyone has any issue in terms of knowing the panel. They've been introduced, so let's get to the hard questions first. It's a debate. We will certainly do one round of questions and perhaps two rounds over here. And in the end, towards the end, I will leave about 20 minutes for Q&A from the audience so that you have a chance of interacting with these panelists as well. Dr. Bajwa, let's start with yourself over here. And I think you already know the questions on my mind, which I want to ask you. As you have the experience of running both an MFI and a microfinance bank, how do you see these two models going into 2030?
I mean, there is a short-term and a long-term perspective to it. I think in the short term, clearly, the MFI model is much more robust, and it has tested some of the worst, issues which confronted us, including COVID and floods and this and that. And perhaps the reason is that the loan size was small. The relationship between the entity and the client was very strong, and that led to a very robust model of financing. As we compare this to the microfinance banks, the biggest difference was that the size of the ticket size was probably double or more than double. And then, of course, was that there was multiple borrowing, same client running after the same client. As in yesterday, the chairman of the PMN stated that, in fact, there are only 1 million households, and within a household you have 3 or 4 borrowers, and each borrower has more than 1 or 2 or 3 loans. So if you multiply that, that's the numbers which he was talking about. So I think the time has come to really take stock of the situation. One of the things is that the size, the definition of microcredit loan in Pakistan is 5 lakhs.
Up to 3 million.
Up to 3 million now. But when you look at average ticket size of MFI, it's like around 40 to 50,000 rupees. For a microfinance bank, it's around 100,000 rupees. So nobody has reached the threshold, the threshold which the central bank has given. So the question here is then many of us are running after the same clients, and so should we do that, or should we have some kind of a policy where we have one entity servicing one client, and that entity which services the client there is no bar on giving a bigger loan that will allow the entity to have a better relationship with the client. They will have the space to also work with the client in terms of their growth and in terms of their businesses. And more importantly, the cost of delivery of services will be reduced, because at the moment, if there are 3 entities running after the same client, so there are 3 times more cost. And so at the end of the day, it might reduce the interest burden on the client. So to me, this needs to be looked at. In the long term, I think microfinance banks have a huge advantage. The biggest advantage, of course, is they're not dependent upon a third party to provide debt, and they can raise their capital, which is a great, and most of the banks, microfinance banks, are actually self-sufficient. And so they have stood the test of the time in terms of their assets, which they, both assets as well as liabilities they have created. And so to me, I think in the long term, it has to be the microfinance banks. Now, but the biggest question is, do we need 12 of them? Do we need 24, or do we need 6? And this is a debate which perhaps is being now opened up.
Let me put you on the spot.
Yes.
What would you want? What's the number that you envisage? What's the crystal ball telling you?
The number will depend upon the interest of investors, because at this stage, if you ask me, the interest of investors coming into and putting capital into microfinance banks is not very optimistic, let me put it. And so the optimism needs to be created, and once that is done, If there are well-capitalized banks, even 12 is fine. But if they are less capitalized, then we need to look into that. Do we need some mergers going on? Because the capital structure will determine this. And there is also a new mismatch which has happened. If you look at the minimum capital requirements of a microfinance bank versus a digital bank, that again is a very big mismatch. So we don't know where we are going to go.
Before I end your question, regulatory support, if given to you to solve this problem, what would your two big asks be?
The biggest, the first ask would be that we need to increase the capital. I think there is no way out of it. If you're doing serious financial services, raising public money, then you have to be more serious in your affairs. And I think the IFC in the earlier session talked about corporate governance. I think that's very important, bringing in the right people for the job. The problem in Pakistan, and perhaps I don't know about India, is that you don't find the right people for the job. You might have very good bankers, but then they have little knowledge about microfinance. You can bring in microfinance players, they have little knowledge about the commercial banking, the other side of it. So there is a mismatch happening, and this seesaw is not helping the industry.
Thank you, Dr. Bajwa. I think very interesting points made with regards to the future as Dr. Bajwa sees. Both models seem to be on the horizon for him, with perhaps a more focus on the microfinance bank. But let's talk to Yasser about this. Does he have a different perspective on this? How does he see this panning out into the future? What does PMIC have to say on this?
If you allow me to, just take, I won't take more than 3 to 5 minutes. Can somebody, put on the presentation? So before I put on the presentation, I think the biggest challenge now is the funding challenge. And my discussion with even Alok and some of the people working in Bangladesh in the sector, is there is a lot of support from the government and from the development agencies. In my opinion, in Pakistan, the development agencies withdrew too quickly from Pakistan, and we became very commercial. I used to disagree with Dr. Bajwa Saab when he used to say, maybe 4 or 5 years back, I was very young at that time, and Bajwa Saab was very experienced. So he used to say that we need to have direct subsidized lending. So I would not say subsidized, but at least we need to have directed lending. In India, there is directed lending. And in Bangladesh, many development institutions are still providing, funding to PKSF and many other, in other countries as well. The way I look at it, so first is the funding. So it's good to see the World Bank, ADB, and many other institutions now coming back and, looking at providing funding to Pakistan. The way I look at the sector and the actors to evolve is something that is happening in the world but has already happened in the microfinance sector in many countries. So if you look at this diagram, it shows that how the entities have evolved in the last 2 decades. So those entities which were working on ecosystems were very few. These are the top 10 companies, right? Capitalization. There were only 2 companies who used to work on ecosystem approach. And as we see now, there are only 2 companies who do not work on ecosystem approach. So these are the 8 companies who have evolved over the years and are now the largest. They work on the complete ecosystem, and based on that, they have, with client-centric approach. They have built the whole ecosystems for their clients. Now, going forward, next slide, please, quickly. Amir Saab is looking at me. Amazon, they started with selling books, right? Now they have online retail, they have delivery, they are in e-commerce. They have started providing funding to their customers. So that's customer-centric. But that was already there in the microfinance sector. Please, next slide, please. Look at Grameen. Yeah, look at Grameen. You know, they started providing cellular operations to their clients. They have Grameen Danone, through which they, you know, used to work with the livestock clients, and they have developed, you know, milk value chains. And the case is very similar, next slide, with BRAC. You know, so the social businesses that they have developed over the years have not only benefited these organizations in diversifying their sources of income that was previously only based on interest, but now on number of social businesses, and at the same time have benefited their clients not only through funding, but increasing their incomes and resources, thus, you know, further reducing the risks of the organizations. Because if the client is, you know, going up, the loan size goes up, and the ability to repay also goes up. Thank you.
I think one interesting aspect came from Yasir's comment is perhaps diversification is something that we need to look towards the future, and a focus area coming from that. But I do remember Naveed Khan's last year's statement that perhaps the microfinance banks need to focus upon one unique aspect, and perhaps that could give them a growth aspect. So Chairman and CEO need to see how their strategies need to be aligned going forward. But it's a very interesting...
You want me to respond on that?
I'm going to be running short on time.
I'll quickly. So what I'm saying is not to go into too many businesses, but if you find your niche, so if you can, you know, have expertise in the livestock sector and use the whole dairy value chain, you are still diversifying, right? So we have Talim Finance.
So you're talking vertical,
yeah, so one vertical, yeah. So, but it's still not microfinance, but it is related to what your clients do. So like, you know, similar to what NRSP has done, have started doing, they have their own warehouse of rice, and so that is what I'm...
Certainly, it depends on the ability to have the right kind of structures, the right kind of capital to support that kind of strategy. Moving on to Namus, how will the sector see, given the focus of SDGs and the impact of that? Your thoughts on that, Namus? And given 2013 and where we are in Pakistan right now with all its challenges, how do you see us getting there?
So firstly, I don't know how to I'm not going to stand up, Yasir, and I don't have any slides, so I just have a piece of paper, so I'll speak to that. I think the one thing that really struck me was when I first got the invite for the event and I saw 2030, automatically I had this idea of a very remote 2030, you know, in the future. In reality, 2030 is 7 years from now. So we need to be slightly pragmatic about what we can do in that period. I think microfinance is very uniquely positioned in that it caters to the most economically fragile, the bottom of the pyramid. So the impact in terms of development, in terms of social outcomes, I think microfinance is a very, very powerful conduit in that space. I think one of the main things in Pakistan, and if we look at the 7-year window, you know, I think product diversification is something that will be very, very important. I think anything where we can build resilience, climate resilience, climate adaptation in housing, in agriculture, that is very, very important. I think savings instruments, given Pakistan's macro volatility, you know, I think instruments where we can help households build buffers for rainy days, that is going to be very, very important. Microinsurance obviously is a huge safety net. I mean, so these are things that I think diversification in the first instance is something that's going to be very important. I think technology obviously can play a big role in outreach. Technology can also bring down operating costs on the affordability side of things. And financially, I think financial literacy, you know, we cannot, one thing that struck me about the video, that you see these women who are, you know, financially included and have bank accounts and have digital wallets and things. So it's very, very empowering. So financial literacy, financial inclusion, especially for women, I think the outcomes are very, very instantaneous, very, very clear, and of course, any happy wife, happy life, as they say. So, I think that in a society where the women are flourishing, you automatically will see, monumental progress.
Thank you, Namus. I'm going to just move forward in the interest of time and come back for a second round a bit later on. Said Saab, 2-3 things over the 2 days we've heard from the regulator as well, nano loans and gold-backed lending. Yet none of the speakers have spoken about that at the moment. Given ASA and given the regional perspective that ASA brings into the conversation, how do you see the impact coming across and what plans do you have for 2030 on this?
Thank you. Thank you, Amir. It's a pleasure to be here. In fact, if we see micro, even I was watching the film just presented by Dr. Alok also, and if you watched it closely, almost 90% of the borrowers were women. Because it is the basic spirit of microfinance is poverty alleviation, financial inclusion, and women empowerment. And I was reading a statement of Mr. Kofi Annan, the ex-Secretary General of UN, some time back. He said at one forum that the most effective tool for economic development in any country is to empower women. In ASA, we have 97% women borrowers out of 625,000. We have the highest women clientele in Pakistan. And going forward, yes, we will continue with this segment because of the fact that if we look at the demographics of Pakistan, it's a country with a population of around 230, someone is saying 240, someone is saying, unfortunately, 250. It's not yet very well established. So just say 230, and with a male-female ratio of around 50-50. So we have a population or a target market of around 120, 130 million. Even if we take 30 to 40% of that segment to be my prospects or my target market, that's a huge market that we can cater over the next 5-10 years. Another point that I want to stress here is Dr. Alok mentioned about the group-based lending, and which is in ASA we follow group-based individual lending approach. And yes, going forward, technology is unavoidable, unstoppable. Change, I think, is something which is constant. Every other thing changes. In ASA also, we plan to go for digitization in a manner that our group lending approach doesn't get disturbed. We will move into digitized disbursements. We will move into digital collections. The group concept should remain there because that is the basic of ASA model.
Interesting point, Said Saab, group lending versus individual lending. We've seen organizations shift from the group lending model and more into the individual lending model. Perhaps in the next round, I'll ask you what went right with you, that you're sticking to group lending. And perhaps Dr. Baj will ask, given both on the bank side, on this side, why group or individual seems to be more of the focus going forward. But before that, certainly Mumtaz Saab, given credit bureau experience and everything, standard question perhaps for you is, in a rapidly changing, where was my question? There it is. Since data is currently limited, how can we overcome the challenge to solve the data issue as an industry?
Thank you, Amar. The credit bureau industry in the country is in a very early stage. Although ECIB has been in existence for good about 25 years, but somehow ECIB was just providing a regulatory service which was more of a negative or positive report. It was not a classic credit bureau from that point of view. Now that 20 years period of just reading the credit information report has really put our financial system at a certain risk, if I may be allowed to say that, because we have lost the importance of data which comes in that credit information report, which could actually be analyzed at the industry level. And that thing, it has started from the financial institutions, and it is seeping into the customers also. So there is a lack of, as Namus was mentioning about financial literacy, it is lacking both at the institutional level and as well as at the consumer level. So the most important thing in this thing is, personally, I think in terms of growth, when you talk of digitization or digital lending and digital receiving of funds, at the end of the day, you need a database which helps you take instant decisions. Because we all talk about customer journey. Now, in that customer journey, I'll just go back a little. We lost focus on what information we should be collecting. At the risk of saying something which is not fair, the central bank has revised its data collection formats after 25 years. Now, this is something which is an ongoing process in every industry, and there is always a forum which provides you that uniformity of information so that the sender of information does not have to worry about various formats of the borrowing. Today, we have a different format for the commercial banking and microfinance bank industry, and we have a different format for microfinance institutions, although fundamentally they are doing the same thing. I can understand that there will be a format change in terms of if we go into a telco-based model information collection, or there may be a difference of information coming from a utility company into the credit bureau, and as well as fintechs, because in fintechs they gather minimum possible information, but there at the back end they have their own algorithms and they are relying on the history of the borrower. I can tell you one thing with surety, that there has been a revolution in terms of collecting data. The commercial banking industry has contributed only 2 million records in last 70 years. Microfinance industry has contributed about 12 million. And the nascent fintech industry, which is called nano lending, has contributed about 5 million records. This in 2 years. So things are changing. Now that data is coming, that's where I see the future.
So the question then arises, are the current institutions ready for that, giving that data and making sense of the data to take decisions thereafter and change their strategies? So before I begin round two, we've heard some interesting thoughts coming across. The model is there, the banks will be there, but let's put a different perspective into play before I give the second round of questions. Digital retail banks, hybrid models of digitization plus brick and mortar. I think we need to debate that as well. Will the digital retail banks tomorrow change the microfinance model? They will have a consumer license. They can easily go down market and attract this market. Does this require more human capital perspective onto the microfinance model? That is the debate that we need to have. Challenges will come. Every year there's going to be a flood. We need to account for that flood into our current play. We need to build resilience into the balance sheet. Yes, capital will play a key component. Yes, the human capital will play even a greater component into our future. Yes, data will play a key critical role. Yes, the multilaterals will certainly support those aspects. But the key thing is, are we ready for tomorrow? What are the steps that we need to take as institutions to be ready for the change of tomorrow that's going to come? And it's going to come. Let's not debate that. So, Dr. Bajwa, the models we talked about, what are your thoughts on the other challenges that we see on the horizon, and how are you ready, your institutions, to ensure that you are well-versed and ready to bring in 2030 as a good round year for your institutions?
I mean, if you're talking about challenges in terms of new players coming in, that's pure competition. Competition does nothing but to improve the working of your institution and the environment. So competition is good. For the digital banks, there's little knowledge at the moment that what kind of a business model they're going to bring in. But there was this, there's a new kid around, and that's the nano loan guys, and we've heard about them, and we've heard about the lending models and the predatory interest rates they were charging, or they're still charging, or whatever. The question here is that had this had any effect on the existing microfinance clients? To me, very little at this stage. So they've created a new market niche, and their claim to fame is that they want to, service a need which is there. And we heard about that there is a dire need for some health issues or something of this sort. So that is their model. But at the end of the day, the existing microfinance, the classical microfinance, the MFIs and the MFBs, they have to also sort out their own models. What is happening is that they have slowly drifted away from the asset-based lending to gold-based lending. Now there are issues around gold-based lending. Gold is, in our society, is the proprietary of a woman, and the gold was given by the parent of that lady, and now the husband is using the gold as an asset. So is this, does it have any moral significance or not? That needs to be sorted out and debated. At the same side, there is a slow drift from agriculture, which is 70% of your population, and towards moving towards these, and clean lending towards this asset-based lending. So we have to go back and see our model itself. And the third very important issue is about the group-based. I mean, why is it that Pakistan, unlike India, has moved away from group loan? And the reason is because there was these, what we call the Bajis, which came in. So the Bajis started owning the group. So there was a very interesting aspect where the group was owned by an intermediary, an agent, who would then access loans of everybody and use and misuse, or whatever you call it. So the Baji-based approach is also something, I don't know, Mr. Alok, whether it has happened in India or not, but in Pakistan, it caught like wildfire. So the Bajis came and they just started ruling the microfinance sector, like in a great way. So these are some of the challenges which we see, unless we go back to the basics. And this is perhaps the final kind of a message which needs to be given very clearly. Go back to the basics. Look at are we creating an asset? The question is, are we creating an asset because of this financial service? If not, then what are we doing? Why are we here then? And if the asset is not being created, then what are we doing? I mean, are we just doing consumption-based lending? And the results, we know what is going to happen to those consumption. We never heard in Pakistan about suicides. And this time we started hearing about suicides because of nano loans. So we need to be very careful of where we are nudging towards.
So it's a very good point. So the model of the 2030 is go back to the basics. I think that's a message which comes across. One key thing before I move on to Yasir for Mumtaz Saab is data downloads need to be done in the right shape and frame and manner. There has to be some element of secrecy and ensuring that non-data is not also downloaded by various players. So we need to be clear on ownership of data and what data is acceptable to go. Yasir, you did talk about vertical integrations and vertical steps to go, but the collaboration aspect, I think that's something that we still need to debate. Fintechs about a year, 2 years ago were the darling of the markets, and we saw a lot of seed money coming in. Whatever happened, we see less of them right now. But the model at that time was to collaborate, and the word was not competition, but co-opetition and working together to get to the end goal. Have thoughts changed? Do you see by 2030 what kind of collaborative elements will come into play?
In my opinion, if you are in the same line of business, there is not much room for collaboration, because what the fintech were supposed to do is something that, ultimately is what the microfinance institutions are also doing. So I think that's why that could be one of the reasons that it didn't take place. But collaborations are required when I see, the huge dairy kind of portfolio, which is currently now almost 30-35% in microfinance. Can there be collaboration between the private sector, the dairy companies like Alpers or Nestle's? In what I have observed that in last couple of decades, there have been numerous efforts, but they have not gone to any scale. And that's why what I was proposing is something that has worked well, not only in Bangladesh, but also in India. We'll see a number of companies in India, and Alok would, also maybe highlight that later, that these companies have now dairy, the whole dairy value chains. When it comes to, digitization, the earlier question, and we were also discussing yesterday, there are 38 million households, and only 8 million households are part of the banking sector now. And I'm not even talking about individuals now. And there are 30 million households which are not part of the formal banking sector. So even if the digital banks come in and, a number of other kind of institutions come in, I see that there is huge room. And as Bajwa Sahab said, microfinance, I think, needs to go back to its, kind of basics of serving those clients which may not be served in the urban areas by nano lenders or the digital banks. When I talk to some of these digital banks, I don't see in their business model, or maybe they might change in the coming years, serving the kind of clients that microfinance institutions are serving, right? They are more interested in creating those payment platforms, or for that matter, serving other kind of banking services which either the commercial banks are not providing at this moment. Also, somehow I feel that we sort of, keep on moving to new things and new structures and models without fully developing the ones on which we are working. There's no harm in that if those are more efficient and could serve more purpose, then that's fine. But I feel with very low penetration of mobile phones. I know there are numbers which say, everyone in Pakistan has a mobile phone, but when you go to the PTA site, look at the number of women, it's not more than 23-24%. Look at the smartphone penetration with women, it's not more than 10-15%. And then also look at the 3G services available in Pakistan. I mean, when we travel, Amir, you must be traveling into rural areas to go and look into your branches. We don't find any, you know, most of the time we don't find any mobile service, at least the internet service. So I feel that that's fine, it will happen, but in that interim period, the role of the microfinance institution and the traditional microfinance is critical.
Thank you, Yasir. Interesting thoughts. Penetration of telco services into the rural areas. There are some banks out there who have actually, the journey of origination is now all digital based. So we do see some penetration over there to support the internet. So digitization is something which has come about, will come about. So Namus, can you share some of the innovative approaches that you have seen over the years that you've worked upon? And how do you see some more coming across? What are your future thoughts on that? And perhaps solutions as well, given the challenges that we have.
On the, sorry, can you repeat it?
It's an open question. You can give me some thoughts on where do you see your sector supporting Pakistan in this one?
So, I mean, I think, so there's a couple of things. So firstly, the key question, I mean, I was told that, you know, I would be asked to answer was in terms of how we look at the impact of the microfinance sector in terms of development and social outcomes. So I think one of the things that, you know, our country director also talked about yesterday was the prevalence of nano loans and the hazards. And Bajwa Sahab has also mentioned that we're seeing suicides in Pakistan for the first time. I think it's very important to be very mindful of the negative impacts also. It's not just, you know, so when I talk about impacts, I'm not just talking about, I mean, on the positive side, obviously we should have benchmarks on outcomes, on social outcomes, on gender outcomes, on, you know, all of the green outcomes, all of that. And, you know, globally we see, you know, people have used technology, geotagging, surveys, mobile apps, AI, blockchain, big data, all of that, but we're talking about a 7-year window in Pakistan. I think in Pakistan we need to think of the priorities where we want to see meaningful impact in the microfinance sector. I think financial inclusion as a whole, obviously, as the Deputy Governor mentioned, microfinance has a big role to play. Gender outcomes, climate outcomes, whether they're productive loans, consumption loans, you know, those, I think the industry as a whole needs to brainstorm what are the positive outcomes that we want to support through the sector. And then create some healthy competition amongst yourselves. Benchmark.
Let me put some challenge into that. Given, as you mentioned, we still have about 6 years to go, do you see by 2030 the things that you are looking at, do you think those being solved by the microfinance sector? And what would you want changes, if any, done from the World Bank's perspective into it?
So, I mean, from the World Bank's perspective, for example, I know we've been talking about this for a while, but I promise you, me and Louis are working very hard to get this climate risk fund to the market very, very soon. We do know that the sector has huge problems, existential problems in many ways at the moment, right? The capital problem, the liquidity problem, but the climate problem is an existential problem which will kind of, so I think from our perspective, I think as also the chairman of PMIC mentioned yesterday, there is a movement away from agriculture finance, there is a movement away from those areas which are deemed to be climate, so we can, however, as the World Bank, for example, we are seeing these trends. And you know, there are food security implications, there's disintermediation, there's marginalization. So for us, the climate risk fund, if something is that, to me, if that is something that is up and running in 7 years, and that has allowed you to move back into agriculture, if you say we're going back to basics, then you need to go back into the villages, right? Then you need to go back to these kind of products. So then if we have given the sector the comfort that there is a viable institution that will protect, and which is the government's, it's not the World Bank's institution, it's governments of Pakistan's institution, which stands ready to support you in the face of a climate shock. And if it's an extreme climate shock, we are promoting that it should be grants, it shouldn't be liquidity. The government needs to come. So I think these kind of things then, so we're not going to solve anything, but we need to start moving in that direction to recognize what the issues are and try to address them in a sustainable way.
I think it's a valid point. Agri needs to be a dominant part of the microfinance balance sheets because that's a sector that we should be supporting a lot more. climate risk fund is the need of the hour. I think anyone that I speak to from a regulatory point of view, from a multilateral point of view, this does come about. The other aspect I think that also needs to go into the Pakistan credit guarantee structure or bank or whatever, what the central bank was looking on to is the need of the hour as well. The supporting element has to come about from a multi-pronged attack, I would say. The regulator needs to play a part, the multilaterals and the institutions themselves from a capital preservation or an enhancement point of view, they need to play their part. Back to you, Said Saab. Given ASA's experience in the South Asian market, what new would you want to bring about into Pakistan going into 2030? And also, you seem to be one bank which is really believing in the group structure a lot more than some of the other institutions. So your focus over there is commendable, but do you see that withering away as time goes on?
In fact, I'm a newcomer in microfinance, but with all due respect to Bajwa sir, I would like to make a very short statement.
Please, this is a grand debate,
Yeah,
so
with
you
all,
have the liberty
yes,
to counter
I'm a newcomer
anyone on this stage, because I do expect a lot more
a
from
very
the
short
audience.
statement. He talked about the Baji culture. Yes, he's right. But unfortunately, this Baji culture is prevalent, the women-based group lending is based in Bangladesh, in India, in Sri Lanka, in Myanmar. 75% or rather 80% of the borrowers in these countries, and they do have some success stories, some role models, which unfortunately we have not been able to develop yet, even after 20 years in the microfinance sector, which is something very unfortunate. We should have at least one role model or one success story, whereas India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar, Philippines, and Sri Lanka, they do have some role models and success stories, mainly based on this Baji culture or the women empowerment factor. One. Two, we were talking about the technology. In fact, in one of the countries where ASA operate in East Africa, what they did is they started giving mobile phone loans to their clients on some affordable terms and conditions and pricing. So this mobile phone, because even in Pakistan, besides being a socio-cultural issue, women having, or particularly in rural areas, it is also an affordability issue in some areas. So as I mentioned, in one country in East Africa, ASA introduced this mobile phone loan or lending facility. So there are many ways by which we can get the customers on board in the digitalization process. But again, I would focus on one thing which Yasir have also mentioned, that micro should remain focused on the micro. Micro shouldn't try to do what the commercial banks are doing. Even if I am a microfinance bank, I could have two different streams. And by that I mean, I could have an asset stream based purely on the microfinance principles, derived on the basic principles of the microfinance, and I could have a commercial banking stream for deposits and other payment services and things like that. So it's workable. But if we try to mix up both the things and try to evolve something new, then it becomes difficult.
Interesting. In the interest of time, Mumtaz, last question before I open up to the audience. Since you mentioned data is currently limited, how can we overcome this challenge to solve the data issues as an industry?
That's what I have been trying to do for last 5 years. But before that, I just want to make a small comment. Yasir was talking about collaboration, you raised this issue. data is also one area where a lot of collaboration is required because data is available and stored in silos. Once that data is combined with the financial data and with the telco data, it gives you more power for decision making and more power for accessing the people whom you want to access. So, and somehow people realize the importance of their data, but they are not using it and they are not willing to collaborate on that because they think that it is their data. And there are ways of collaborating without even sharing the data. You can develop models and later on those models can run independently without having the same information set. And this can be done through a sandbox thing. But I think there's now a time where PMN should lead the way in terms of developing the formats because there's a lot of information available with the microfinance banks and with the microfinance institutions. There is, with the help of Dr. Bajwa, we started a new product because Nadra would not share the family tree. They started collecting the data about the families because once a borrower is coming and he would share all the information. Now we have built a sufficiently large database on that basis. Now if all the institutions started doing that, we'll be able to see the family indebtedness also. Dr. Alok mentioned something about that there's in the group borrowing and in the family indebtedness. So there are ways where we can collect more data and there are ways where a lot of data is residing in the institutions which they are not sharing at the industry level. So that data may be useful to them at the institutional level, but at the industry level it is not useful. So what we are trying to do is actually educate the industry as well as consumers. We have come up with a consumer app also where every individual can see their score. They can know that at what rate they should be borrow, which are the banks which can be offering. Those are the enhancements which we are looking at. So having said that, we have multiple services even at this point in time, but it takes some time for the financial institutions to develop confidence in those products like scores and other things.
Thank you, Mutasa. I think one of the key issues is consequence of default. We may have all the data in here, we may have the impact thereof or no data, but I still feel that as an individual in Pakistan, if I default, nothing's going to happen to me. And at those levels, if the consequence of default is not there and it's not data linked, then we do have a problem. In the West, if you see, if you do have a low score, your mortgage rates go higher, you may not get something on rent, or your car, may, you will not be able to, get the right car at the right price. So there's consequence of having good credit behavior, and data drives that. But the bigger part is the human behavior that we need to look upon as from a financial literacy, digital literacy to go about. So before I move to the audience, Dr. Alok, you did hear the Pakistan perspective on a lot of the key things that we have over here. Where do you see the Indian markets going into 2030, and what are the key challenges that you feel that they need to overcome? Okay, we can't hear him.
Sir, we can't hear you.
Just a minute, Dr. Alok. Let's try to fix your mic issue first. Dr. Alok, I think we're still grappling with your mic issue, so I'm just going to wait, and then in the meantime, let's open up to the audience, and if I could request.
Thank you. Assalamu to everyone. So we're going to take 3 questions together, and then we'll have the panel answer them and see if we have time. I'd request you to please keep the question brief, and I'd also like to request you to ask a question instead of giving a comment. Navid Saab, you have the first question.
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, I think, Saeed Saab, you mentioned something very well, and that was basically sticking to your basics. And Amir, I'm flattered that you remember what I said last time. And I still believe that you need to stick to the basics. What Yasser was talking about is from an apex institutional perspective, where you need to go and do sector development, and therefore, you need to do the verticals. Rashid Bajwa has done that, and it's a success story. And it was, by the way, done prior to what Rashid did in the sugar industry. So I think there are examples of success. We need to fix ourselves and stay within our space. MFI needs to stay within their space. There is enough depth. So is space for MFBs and the commercial banks, etc. So I think what we have lost out on, and in the next 30 years we need to figure out, is to stay within our space and grow that space. I'm sorry, I'm putting a comment because I think that itself leads you into other discussions. What do we expect to do? And from Dr. Alok, I really want to understand what is the mediation cost that you have vis-a-vis ours, because that's the biggest challenge. And I'm now looking at it from a perspective of bringing the cost down of microfinance lending to the end customer. And that will really sort of put the perspective as to how you position yourself for the next 5 years, 7 years, whatever. That would be my really request to the chair to see how you can.
Great. Thank you. We have a question in the back over there. We'll take that first.
So, thank you, Zainab. We talked about digitization. So one question is that what technologies can the panel specifically point out to which can positively impact digitization and financial inclusion? And the next part of it is how can these technologies and other technologies can help us make those tailored products for the individuals that we were referring to, for the farmers, for the rural markets. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have another question? The second, I'd like to take questions from other people and then come to you, Mohsin, please. There's a question there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see there's been a lot of push and there's been a lot of interest on organizations. Sorry. Does that actually help the client in any way? Is it more beneficial for the client in any case if an organization has actually gone from an MFI to an MFB? One of the things I can see is a lot of organizations are wanting to become an MFB is because of the lack of funding that they're not being able to acquire from different companies. So my question to Mr. Alok would be as well, and from the panel, does the transition from an MFI to an MFB actually, one, help the client? And aside from reducing the cost of borrowing and everything, does it actually help the bank become more, grow more and all? One of the other things is that...
I think we limit to one question. Thank you so much. We are short of time.
Sure.
Do we want to take one more question from the audience? Is there any other question? Mudassir Saab, please. Can you hurry up and get him the mic? And I think, Dr. Mishra, we have the audio back on, so...
Yeah, I think we have heard a lot of comments on requirement for funding and capital, right, which is for both the MFI sector as well as the MFB sector. And this seems to be a trend in Pakistan now, right? I mean, it goes on and off, so every 5, 7 years, 10 years, whenever there's a crisis, something happens, and the entire sector goes down and you need more capital, sector starts to build up, and then again something happens. And what is it that we can do to bring the resiliency into this, into the sector as well? Not about, we talk about climate resilient microfinance, businesses, housing, but we haven't heard about how we can have sustainable institutions themselves, which can resist and which can sustain in this environment of any disaster or a downturn.
Great. Thank you so much, Mudassir Saab. So, Dr. Mishra, there are two questions for you. The first question is, what is the intermediation cost in India?
No, I have
and
heard
sort
it.
of- And the second one also is, you have both? Okay, great. The other one is on transformation and how it can help.
So I have heard it. Yeah. So I heard all the three questions, and I would not be able to go to the moderator's end question because that will take more of a time. If time permits, we can do that. So I will start with the last question first. This question, whenever I go to the investor meetings frequently in Bombay, this question is asked, the same question, why does the sector goes through cyclical ups and downs? It is pertinent to India also. And all the things which I heard here, data issues, nano loans, digital lenders, back to basics, all the things are present here also, but we don't have time to deliberate on it. But on this ups and downs, I always say that as a risk person, you have to look at a long-term trend. In India, I say, if I look at start from 2010, leave aside the period away from 2010, 2010 to 23, you had 4 major events. And out of that, 2010 AP crisis, 2016 temporary problem of demonetization, 2020 to 21 and you can say COVID, and in 20 only you can say Assam problem. So out of that, if you see the two problems, demonetization and COVID, they were external problems to us. It faced not only microfinance, every sector. Other than this, two problem areas, AP as well as Assam, was created by the sector to a certain extent. So if we can take care of that, I very well always respond to it that if we can take care of that, the path is smooth. Because external things we cannot control only to a certain extent. And how do we do that? I think all the panelists, if you heard them clearly, I think all the elements of that resilience were there. If I look at it from Rasidji, he said about what I said earlier also, back to basics, touch the base. If I go to Yasirji, I think he again talked about deepening the ecosystem, whether if you're doing one service, maybe you can broaden the ambit of service, more symbiotic relationship. Then there was talk about data quality, and the gentleman, I cannot pronounce his name, from Asai, he also talked about going back to these things, the client relationship. If these things are taken care of, I don't see much of an issue. On a longer term trend line, microfinance is a perfect thing which gives win-win. It gives you stability of returns, and it also gives positive client outcome. On the first question about, I think somebody asked about what is the intermediation cost in India, and I think by intermediation cost we mean operating expenses. So operating expenses in India luckily in the morning only I was looking at the operating cost data for all the top 15 players in the sector to send to Reserve Bank of India. And the operating cost in India, I saw it varies from 4.9% in case of the most efficient organization to around 6.4%. So that's the range which I am currently seeing, 4.9 to 6.4. And I think that's the global best. And if now the second question was about upscaling of microfinance institutions at microfinance banks and what it does. India has gone through that experiment of small finance banks. And in that case, I think on the loan side, or you can say asset side of the bank, nothing much has changed. It is similar products to what microfinance institutions are giving. On the interest rates, surprisingly also, now that they are deposit-based, while microfinance institutions borrow in bulk from the banks, the cost is higher for microfinance NBFCs, but for banks it is retail deposit. But still, on the interest rate, interestingly, there is not much difference between small finance banks. Rather, they would be 100 basis points more than microfinance institutions. On the deposit side, the premise was, when the SCPs were formed, that much of the deposits will come from this client base, but that has not proven to be true because they are economically weaker section. Hardly 5% of your liabilities can come from this section. So this has been the experience with the small finance banks in India, which migrated from from NBFC to banks. So I will stop here, not taking more of your time.
Thank you so much. I think Amir Saab, maybe
I need to intervene and ask a question. Dr. Alok, you mentioned 4.9% as your intermediary cost. This is inclusive of the HR cost?
Yes. Operating expense ratio.
Okay.
All costs
Very
except
shocking.
finance costs.
Yeah, and what would your lending price be at with such a low 4.9 as in?
So I will tell you. Yeah, Rasid ji is saying something. So, let's see. I will break the entire metrics into it, because see, the interest rate is a function of, we start from, first is cost of funds. So cost of fund on an average for NBFC would be, again there is a range, but I will take an average of 12%.
Just one
Then,
question. My apologies. I think we're short of time. So, Dr. Alok, I'll probably be in touch with you to get more details, and I would request DMN to get you.
Most welcome.
We'll probably interact with you more to get the dynamics right, so that we can do some obviously sharing of how it's worked. But we do have a question.
I think what we can also do is maybe get comments from our panelists here on the two questions that we answered. So besides the intermediation cost, is there something that any of you would like to share on the two questions that he addressed on the conversion?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask Ashok Sab one question. You know, we don't often get such an illustrious guest to us. Ashok Sab, can I just ask, I mean, obviously your intermediation or operating costs are very, very impressive. And the World Bank has always, in looking at peer countries across South Asia, Pakistan is one on the higher end. Can you, and we've seen that digitization has been a huge wave of growth for microfinance in India. What were your operating costs before the digitization? And so that would be a very interesting transition to learn more about.
Yeah, thank you. But if I look at it, the digitization has not brought the costs much lower, maybe 20 basis points, 30 basis points. It has mainly come through productivity increase and efficiencies in the value chain. Because let me tell you, in 2010, when the regulations came, the operating costs used to be around 10, 12, 13%, and sometimes even more. So now that it has to come to 5%, it is mainly because of productivity increase, and more efficiencies in value chain. For example, I will just give you a very small example because there is not much time. Like if suppose there is the 4.9% example, and which everybody is now following. If suppose the loan officer goes for collections, there is a GPS-based route mapping done so that he optimizes his productivity, so that he doesn't go point A to X and then comes to Y and Z. So all this, there are various nuances to it. So it is not mainly digitization. Digitization is a very small fraction of the lowering of operating costs.
Sorry, Alok, apologies for bothering you too much. But couple of other information which would be very helpful to determine what is the cost of delivery and why is it so low. So what is the case load per credit officer in India, and what is the average loan size?
So the average loan size is 40,000 or to 45,000 Indian rupees, which you can say as $500 US dollars, and the caseload I think on an average would be 600, 650.
It's bullet loans most probably.
Okay.
We have around 250 average, so that's almost 250% more, and that explains a lot. And $500 is like 150,000 Pak rupees. So that explains why the cost is low.
Really, I think, thank you so much, Yasir, for asking that question. Said Saab, you had a point that you wanted to answer?
I just wanted to...
Mike, please, kareeb kar le.
I just wanted to highlight the fact that the borrowers per staff member in India, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka are too high compared to Pakistan. One. Two, Dr. Alok could throw some light on it. In India, the credit officer is supposed to collect the loan, to disburse the loan. He is one in all. Whereas in our some models, we have created SAMs, we have created remedial functions, we have created this. So that has created
so
the
it's not
cost
really an
impact.
apple to
That
apple
has created
comparison.
the cost impact.
Thank you so much for pointing out. I'd like to take our panel's attention to the question on tech and how can tech be used for creating niche products. Maybe Mumtaz Saab, you could, there was a question from there that talked about how tech can be used for product development for specific niches. If there's something you'd like to add, and I'd please request you to be slightly brief.
So how can tech reduce the cost, or how can it impact? Actually,
how can tech do product development? So I think that's product development के लिए tech कैसे इस्तेमाल हो सकता है?
Okay. In terms of product development, data, I can talk about my credit bureau from that perspective, that before Tasdeeq came into being, the only product available in the market was CIR or maybe some sort of bulk analysis. But now we have come out with the credit scores, and we have segment credit scores also. We have a general credit score, we have commercial banking credit score, we have microfinance credit score, and we also have now nano lending credit scores. Similarly, we are now coming out with other segment scores like agri-based scores. We are working with a MFB for the agri loans and their agri score. We have also come out with certain services which are mostly related to the business analytics, industry analysis, industry hotspots, things like that. So now there are multiple things which are available to the MFIs and MFBs, provided they know how to use that and take those services.
Great. Thank you so much. I think Yasser, you wanted to add to this quickly, if you could please.
Yeah, I think as Alok mentioned, and I've been hearing from a number of other, large microfinance institutions across the world, digitization has not reduced the cost of delivery. What it does is it makes the data more transparent, not only for the management to observe, to reduce the risk, but also for the lenders. So, and make it more, you have more analytical data. For the product development part, I think it can help, especially in the agriculture, where we are now observing that you can actually scorecard the agriculture land, right? So how much a land can produce could be determined by using technology. And if you use that technology, you can, determine what is the right amount of fertilizer, what kind of fertilizer, what is the right amount of water, what should be grown in that particular land. So by doing that, technology can be used in many other products as well. So that's my
Thank you so much. Amir, I just now pass the baton on to you for a quick sum up. Thank you.
One key thing which we seem to be we also need to keep in mind is the scale part. Technology does bring about dividends, but we just don't have the scale to really get value from that. If I have 100 clients and I divide it by $100 in terms of the technology aspect of it, it's going to be a low number. It's going to be a small number. But if I have 100,000 clients and I just spend that amount to it, it will actually bring it down. So we need to get to scale to really get the true benefits of technology adoption. And we're all doing it, So to sum it up, the grand debate was an interesting one. I had a hope for a little more chingari in terms of, some bashing towards perhaps the regulators or something of that sense. I should be saying that. But the idea was to actually bring about a debate how everyone can contribute to the betterment and us to get to the goal of whatever it's 40 million, 20 million, whatever it is, but for sure the number that we have right now is quite low. So we really need to get the things together and get them fast. The opportunity is there. I think for sure if I look at from a capital injector's point of view or a shareholder's point of view, microfinance is here to stay. If I look at it from a regulator point of view, microfinance is here to stay. So we just need to get the act together to become a truly viable opportunity and a true viable kind of a support for financial inclusion for the nation's well-being. Thank you very much to my esteemed panel over here. I think a well-deserved applause for all of them. And thank you very much for this thing.
Thank you so much, panelists, and thank you, Amir Saab. Amir Saab, if you could please step forward to give a small memento of appreciation to all of our participant panelists from PMN. So first up, I'd like to call Bajwa Saab to receive his memento from Amir Saab. Can I request Yasir to please come forward? Next up, Namoos, if you could please step forward. Saiduddin Saab, if you could please step forward. Mumtaz Saab, if you could please come forward for yours. And Naved Saab, can I trouble you to please come on stage to give the memento to our chair? Unko den. Jab wo aa jayenge. Inko den. Amir Saab, yours. Can we quickly just get a group photo of the entire panel also, please? Amir Saab, just a group photo with the panel, please. Thank you so much, Dr. Mishra, for joining us and for, telling us about the landscape in India. There's a lot that we have to learn, and I think you will be getting follow-up questions from the panel, over email, because there was a lot that they wanted to ask. But due to the shortage of time, we had to stop them. So thank you so much for taking the time out, and hopefully we can have you in person the next time around for all of these questions. Thank you so much.
Sure. My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amir Saab. Thank you so much, panelists. All right, we now will move on to the closing ceremony for the conference. To start the conference closing ceremony, I'd like to invite Mohsin Ahmed Saab on stage, who will do a wrapping up of the conference and will be sharing the salient features of what has been discussed so far. So, Mohsin, can we please have you on stage? Of course, we all know Mohsin as the CEO of the Pakistan Microfinance Network, who will now be sharing key takeaways. Thanks, Mohsin.
Okay, Ji, so before we close the proceedings for the day, there's going to be 3 speeches in the closing ceremony. One is the ADB Senior Financial Sector Economist. He will share the ADB vision and programs that they're going to come up with for the microfinance sector in the next few years. We have Dr. Amjad Saqib, who is the chairman of Benazir Income Support Program, and we all know him very well for running Ahuat Islamic Finance also. So he's a very known figure in the microfinance industry. And finally, the PM and Vice Chairman, Mr. Murtaza, will close the proceedings with a vote of thanks. Before I give the mic to Mr. Andrew, just a few things. So a few takeaways from this event. What we heard over the last 2 days. Number one, importance. We all know that climate is a risk, and so putting in place a climate risk facility is extremely important. This needs to be dovetailed with the insurance industry, and it should be also, it should work along with climate awareness campaign in the country. The second important issue that we discussed was around the importance of this gender equity, and we had discussions this morning around gender, the focus on the fact that availability of financial services for women is very important, and access to that also involved at different level of institutions the right kind of gender mix. We talked about education finance, we talked about insurance finance, and we talked about the importance of I think one more, insurance finance and the education finance. And also, we did discuss housing, low-cost housing finance. That these are going to be extremely important verticals in the microfinance industry. We had debates on this afternoon on the importance of transparency and how can transparency help in attracting investment, both equity investment and debt investment, also investment from both the commercial banking industry, from the private risk capital, and also from international investors. And what are some of the challenges we face as an industry? Finally, the grand debate. And I think one of the key messages in this is that there is a huge upside potential. We saw that India is at $35 billion industry currently. And that is not even, I think that is 30% of their market. And Pakistan is at $2 billion. So we need to grow. And there was debate around how do we grow? Do we need to have a complex structure, or we need to focus on core business and build networking with a number of players? There was also yesterday a debate about food security, and I think one thing that I got with a very clear message that food security is not a rural poor issue, it's a urban poor issue, and so we need to go back and make sure that the financial services are being made available at that level, and that we need to make sure that at the rural level we have the right kind of the entire ecosystem and financial facility dovetail with each other available for the sector. So I think we learned a lot. What we tried to do in this conference was that we wanted to have a number of different stakeholders, not just microfinance experts, but experts from all that ecosystem that we're talking about. People from the insurance sector, education sector, since we are talking about SDGs, the UN representative. We had gender experts. We had climate experts. So we wanted to have all those stakeholders with whom we are going to work and take the sector forward. The second thing was that we knew that generally speaking, people used to think that the last session is going to be the most, I don't know the English, to matha of the sessions for us. But this time it turned out to be, I think, we deliberately made sure that this is going to be the most exciting of the sessions. So that's something where we want to be 7 years from now, or 2030, and compare that with what India is looking at by 2030. I don't know whether I had to go out also in between, but we know that when they talked about $100 billion of micro lending by 2030. So that's their vision. So we need to have some comparable outreach in the Pakistani market. So now you will come. So thank you very much, Ji.
Thank you, Mohsin, for that very energetic sum up of the conference. Next up, I'd like to ask Mr. Andrew McCarthy, who is the Senior Financial Sector Economist, to give some closing remarks. Andrew is joining us, of course, online. Andrew has over 25 years of experience in emerging economies. He's currently responsible for policy-based programs and advising governments on financial markets transformation. Andrew has worked on key strategic areas, including MFI transformation, SME banking, and women's financial inclusion. It's a pleasure to have us join us. It is a pleasure for us to have you join us, Andrew. Can we please test his sound? We cannot, unfortunately, hear you. So just give us a second. Tech has been failing us since the morning. So I think as Mohsin mentioned, Andrew will be talking about the program that they're designing for Pakistan. And he'll be giving some features of that, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, Mohsin? That's on the agenda. That's what he's going to be talking about. Great. We seem to have lost the video and the sound. Well, we see you again, but we can't hear you. I mean, with all the talk of digital that we've been having for the microfinance sector and for leapfrogging, digital seems to be failing us at this arena. So, I mean, I think it's a bit of a, it is something for us to consider that, yes. And I think one of the things that even Yasser was mentioning in the grand debate was that digital will help, but it's not going to be the panacea. It's not going to be the, end-all solution. And we can see that, at the best place in Islamabad, the capital, we're having issues with technology. So yes, technology is always something that can help, but it can never really replace the essence of microfinance. And I think one of the things, again, that we were talking about, and I think Naved Saab also kind of mentioned that in his comments in the discussion earlier, is back to the basics, right? So I think the niches that microfinance works in are high-touch niches, and in those niches, technology can play the role, but that high touch is very, very important. I'm just gonna. So as we try and resolve our technical issue, I would like to invite on stage our honorable chief guest, Dr. Amjad Saqib, who is the chairperson of the Benazir Income Support Program. Of course, we all know Dr. Saqib, but I am going to introduce him anyway. He is a social entrepreneur, volunteer, and development practitioner. He is the founder of Akhuwat, which is Pakistan's first interest-free microfinance program. In the past, he's also led the Punjab Educational Endowment Fund and the Punjab Welfare Trust for the Disabled. Sir, can I please invite you on stage, Dr. Amjad Saqib Saab?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Very distinguished leaders in microfinance, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Andrew from ADB, then of course very honorable friends, Dr. Rashid Bajwa, Naveed Khan Sahab, Janab Ishfaq Sahab, Malak Fateh Khan, Murtaza Sahab, और फिर Mohsen Sahab, Assalamu alaikum. So let me first thank you for inviting me. I would have been much comfortable if you have invited me just as a participant, because my, all past has been spent over here. So microfinance, the most valuable thing, the best strategy, the vision we had. And then 21 years ago, we started microfinance with slightly different vision. But anyway, towards sustainable and inclusive finance. So this is all what we have been doing. And I must congratulate you, जिस तरह आपने बताया कि different aspects which you have covered during these 2 days. So it has always been a great learning. मैंने तो जो कुछ भी सीखा ऐसी तरह आपसे सीखा. और ये उस सोफे पे मेरे 2 उस्ताद बैठे हुए हैं जो फ़ोन से खेल रहे हैं. मैं चंद बातें आपको ज़रा मतवज्जो करना चाहता हूँ. माइक्रो फाइनेंस के बारे में तो आपने बहुत कुछ सुन लिया और आप बहुत बेहतर जानते हैं कि किसी भी मुल्क की मुआशी तरक्की में, गुर्बत के ख़ात्मे में, वेमेन एम्पावरमेंट में, एंटरप्राइज डेवलपमेंट में इसका कितना किरदार है. लेकिन आप मुझे थोड़ी सी इजाज़त दें तो आज मैं एक मुख्तलिफ तनाज़ुर में, चूँकि मुझे आपने बेनज़ीर इनकम सपोर्ट प्रोग्राम के हवाले से दावत दी है, तो वो भी मैं कुछ बताना चाहूँगा. और फिर मैं ये आपसे अर्ज़ करूँगा कि किस तरीके से ये सिक्के के जो 2 रुख हैं इनको जोड़ा जा सकता है. क्योंकि मैं जो महसूस करता हूँ कि एक दूसरे के बगैर ये दोनों अधूरे हैं. पहली चीज़ तो ये है कि बेनज़ीर इनकम सपोर्ट प्रोग्राम को आम तौर पर ये कहा जाता है, हो सकता है आप में से अक्सर ये बात ना कहते हो, कि ये लाखों करोड़ों लोगों को भिखारी बनाने की एक कोशिश है. बहुत से दानिश्वर ये कहते हैं کہ آپ 4,000 یا 5,000 مہینے سے دے کے کیا خدمت کر رہے ہیں. یہ تو ایسے ہی ہے جیسے آپ نے کشکول گدائی کسی شخص کے ہاتھ میں تھما دیا اور وہ پھر آپ کے ان پیسوں کی طرف دیکھتا ہے, کوئی کام نہیں کرتا. لیکن اس کو دیکھنے کے دو انداز ہیں. پانی کا گلاس آدھا خالی ہوتا ہے, آدھا بھرا ہوا بھی ہوتا ہے. یہ ممکن نہیں ہے کہ ان 5,000 روپے یا 6,000 روپے ماہوار پر ایک غریب گھرانہ زندگی گزار رہا ہو. کوئی شخص 5 یا 6,000 روپے زندہ نہیں رہتا. یہ وہ لوگ ہیں جو پہلے سے 20, 25, 30,000 روپے کماتے ہیں. یہ جو بے نظیر انکم سپورٹ پروگرام کے توسط سے ان کو اضافی رقم ملتی ہے, یہ ان کی غربت ختم نہیں کرتی, ان کی غربت کی شدت میں کمی لے کے آتی. مثال, میری ایک بہن ہے, ایک بھائی ہے, غریب رشتہ دار ہے, دوست ہے. وہ 20, 25, 30,000 یا 40,000 روپے کماتا ہے. میں کہتا ہوں تمہارا بچہ اسکول نہیں جاتا, یہ لو 5,000 روپے مہینے کے, بچے کو اسکول بھیجو. تو کیا میں اپنے فرض کی ادائیگی کر رہا ہوں یا میں اس کو بھیک دے رہا ہوں؟ یہ وہ بنیادی سوال ہے جو ہمیں اپنے آپ سے پوچھنا ہے کہ جو ہم سے پیچھے رہ گئے, جو غربت کی شدت کا شکار ہو گئے, وہ بھی ہمارے قومی وجود کا حصہ ہیں. ان کو 5,000 دینے سے, ان کے ایک بچے کو اسکول لے جانے سے, ان کے گھر میں ایک حاملہ عورت کو مدد کرنے سے یا اس کے بچے کو سٹنٹنگ سے بچانے کے لیے, کیا یہ رقم بھیک ہے؟ تو یہ میں اس کو اس طریقے سے بھی دیکھتا ہوں کہ پاکستان دنیا کی شاید سب سے بڑی ویلفیئر اسٹیٹ ہے کہ جہاں 1 کروڑ گھرانوں کو ریاست نے اپنی آغوش میں لے رکھا ہے اور اس کو کچھ نہ کچھ مدد مل رہی. یہ مدد کم ہے یا زیادہ, اس کا انحصار تو اس امر پر ہے کہ ہمارا ٹیکس ٹو GDP ریشو کیا ہے. لیکن بہرحال یہ تو ہمیں تسلیم کرنا پڑے گا کہ اپنے ان محدود وسائل کے اندر رہتے ہوئے 500 ارب کے لگ بھگ رقم معاشرے کے پسے ہوئے پسماندہ لوگوں کے پاس پہنچ رہی ہے. تو ایک ویلفیئر اسٹیٹ کیا ہوتی ہے؟ ویلفیئر اسٹیٹ یہی ہوتی ہے جو اپنے سبجیکٹس کی زندگی کا, عزت اور آبرو کا, تعلیم کا, روزگار کا, صحت کا یا چھت کا بندوبست کرے. اس حوالے سے اگر کوئی یورپ کی کسی ملک کی ہم بات کرتے ہیں, میں کسی ملک کا نام نہیں لیتا لیکن اسکینڈینیوین چلیں آپ کہہ لیں, وہاں پر کوئی عورت پریگننٹ ہوتی ہے یا کوئی بچہ بیمار ہوتا ہے یا کسی کی نوکری چلی جاتی ہے تو اس کو 500, 1,000, $2,000 گھر پہنچنا شروع ہو جاتے ہیں. اور ہم بڑے احساس کمتری کے ساتھ کہتے ہیں کہ دیکھیں یہ ہے اسلامی ریاست, یہ ہے فلاحی ریاست, یہ ہے وہ ریاست جو اپنے گرے ہوئے لوگوں کو اٹھاتی ہے. اب سویڈن کی آبادی غالباً 50 لاکھ ہے, 10 لاکھ ہاؤس ہولڈز ہیں جن کو یہ مدد ملتی ہے, شاید 1 لاکھ ہاؤس ہولڈز ہوں. 1 لاکھ ہاؤس ہولڈ کا مطلب ہے 4 یا 5 لاکھ لوگ ہوں. تو اس کے مقابلے میں ایک غریب ترین ملک ہے جس کی 1 کروڑ لوگ, 1 کروڑ خاندان یعنی 6 کروڑ افراد کو یہ مدد مل رہی ہے. تو وہاں پر ہم اس مدد کے اوپر نہ جانے کون کون سے الزامات کہ یہ بھیک ہے, یہ گداگری ہے. تو اس کو ایک ڈیفرنٹ پرسپیکٹو میں دیکھنا چاہیے کہ یہ تو ایک ویلفیئر اسٹیٹ کی طرف پہلا قدم ہے, اور وہ وقت ضرور آئے گا جب یہ جو 1 کروڑ خاندان ہے ان کا ہر بچہ اسکول جائے گا اور وہ ایک بہتر زندگی گزارے گا. اسی مثال کو ایک اور طرح سے بھی دیکھا جا سکتا ہے کہ پاکستان کی آبادی 24 کروڑ ہے. یہ باتیں میں اس لیے کہہ رہا ہوں کہ ہم سب غربت سے ایک مدت سے جہاد کر رہے ہیں, اس کے خلاف جد و جہد میں مصروف ہیں. تو اس پرسپیکٹو میں ان لوگوں کے بارے میں ہم اکنامکلی ایکٹیو لوگوں کو لون دیتے ہیں, ان لوگوں کو ہم لون نہیں دیتے. تو ظاہر ہے فائنینشیل انکلوژن میں اگر مائکرو فائنانس نہیں ہے تو پھر کوئی اور کریٹو طریقے تو سوچنے ہیں کہ ان کو کس طریقے سے پاؤں پہ کھڑا کیا جائے. تو پاکستان کی اگر 24 کروڑ آبادی ہے اور 6 افراد پر ایک مشتمل گھرانہ ہے تو 4 کروڑ گھرانے ہیں. 1 کروڑ اوپر کے سمجھیں بہت خوشحال ہیں, اہل ثروت ہیں, کوئی دکھ نہیں ہے, امید ہے, زندگی ہے, خوبصورتی ہے. پھر اس سے نیچے 1 کروڑ ہیں جو درمیانے درجے کے ہیں, بہرحال زندگی میں آگے بڑھنے کی جد و جہد میں مصروف ہیں. پھر 1 کروڑ ہیں وہ نچلا متوسط طبقہ ہے, اور پھر سب سے نیچے 1 کروڑ ہیں جو اس پروگرام یعنی بے نظیر انکم سپورٹ پروگرام کا مطمع نظر ہیں. ان کو اس پروگرام نے اپنی آغوش میں لے کے اپنا دوست بنایا, اپنی بہن سمجھا, اپنا بھائی بنایا. تو جو اوپر کا 1 کروڑ ہے اس کو یہ حق حاصل نہیں ہے کہ وہ ان نیچے کے 1 کروڑ کو اگر کچھ وسائل جا رہے ہیں تو اس پر اعتراض کرے. یہ ایکوٹی کی بھی, یہ ہمدردی, یہ دردمندی, یہ ایثار, یہ قربانی, کیا ہم نہیں جانتے کہ ہمارا کھانا پینا مکمل طور پر ضائع جائے گا اگر ہمارا ہمسایہ بھوکا رہے گا؟ تو یہ 1 کروڑ لوگ یہ بھی تو کسی کے ہمسائے ہیں, یہ بھی تو اس وطن کے شہری ہیں. ہمارا پاکستان تو بن گیا کیونکہ پاکستان بننے کا مطلب یہ تھا کہ مجھے زندگی کی ہر سہولت مل جائے, معاشی, سیاسی, سماجی انصاف. لیکن ان 1 کروڑ گھرانوں کا پاکستان ابھی نہیں بنا کہ یہ غربت کے دشت بے قرار میں جھلس رہے. کوئی راستہ نظر نہیں آتا. یعنی یہ وہ لوگ ہیں جن کے دامن میں امید کی کوئی کومپل بھی نہیں ہے, اور انہی کے بچے جو ہیں وہ اسکول نہیں جاتے, انہی کے بچوں کو روزگار نہیں ملتا, انہی کے بچوں کو ہنر نہیں ملتا. تو بے نظیر انکم سپورٹ پروگرام نہ صرف کفالت کے لیے رقم دیتا ہے بلکہ شاید آپ میں سے بہت سے لوگوں کو علم نہ ہو کہ 80 لاکھ بچے ان کو اسکالرشپ بھی دیتے ہیں. یعنی یہ کفالت کا پروگرام بھی ہے اور 80 لاکھ بچوں کو 2 سے 4 ہزار روپے مہینہ اسکالرشپ ملتا ہے, پرائمری, سیکنڈری اور ہائر سیکنڈری. اور 1 ملین پریگننٹ خواتین ہیں جن کو پریگننسی کے دوران بھی 2000 ملتا ہے اور اس کے بعد 24 مہینے ڈیلیوری کے بعد بھی 2000 روپے ملتے ہیں, تاکہ اس کی صحت اور اس بچے کی صحت. اور سٹنٹنگ آپ سمجھتے ہیں کتنا بڑا ایشو ہے. ہمارے آنے والی نسل جو ہے قد چھوٹا ہو رہا ہے, ہمت حوصلہ جواب دے رہا ہے. جو سٹنٹڈ گروتھ کا مطلب یہی ہے کہ وہ شخص, جو بچہ جو ہے وہ کسی بھی بیماری کا مقابلہ ہی نہیں کر سکتا, اس میں ہمت, حوصلہ اور جوانمردی جیسے خوبیاں بھی نہیں پیدا ہوتی. تو چوتھا کام ہم وہاں پر جو مجھے یہ ذمہ داری سونپی گئی اس دن سے اپنی ٹیم کے ساتھ ہم ایک ایگزٹ اسٹریٹجی کے طور پر مائکرو فائنانس کے ساتھ بھی جوڑنا چاہتے ہیں کہ یہ جو 90-93 لاکھ لوگ ہیں اور ہر سال اس میں 2-4 لاکھوں کا اضافہ بھی ہو رہا ہے, تو کوئی ایسا راستہ ہونا چاہیے کہ جو لوگ آ رہے ہیں کچھ لوگ یہاں سے نکلنا بھی تو چاہیے. اور نکلنے کے لیے 2 ہی راستے ہیں, یا تو اس خاندان کے کچھ لوگوں کو ہنر دے دیا جائے اور یا پھر ان کو مائکرو فائنانس کی سہولت دے دی جائے تاکہ وہ کوئی کاروبار کر سکے. تو یہ ایک لاجیکل کنٹینیویشن ہے کہ فائنینشیل انکلوژن کا مطلب گرانٹس بھی ہے اور فائنینشیل انکلوژن کا مطلب ایکسیس ٹو फाइनेंशियल सर्विसेज थ्रू बैंकिंग इंस्टीट्यूशंस भी है, कोलेटरलाइज्ड और नॉन कोलेटरलाइज्ड लोन्स भी हैं, और जो ऊपर के तबके के लोग हैं उनको तो आप जानते हैं, मैं जानता हूँ, ना हमारी ज़रूरत है ना रियासत की ज़रूरत है। तो बेनज़ीर इनकम सपोर्ट प्रोग्राम के बारे में लोग ये भी कहते हैं कि ये सपोर्ट प्रोग्राम है, ये पॉवर्टी ग्रेजुएशन प्रोग्राम नहीं। अब अपनी अपनी दानिश के मुताबिक हम लफ्ज़ों के गोरख धंधे में खुद को उलझाए रखते हैं। ग्रेजुएशन, सपोर्ट, पॉवर्टी एलिविएशन, असल मंजिल तो एक ऐसे मुआशरे का क़याम है जिसमें हर शख्स इज्जत से ज़िंदा रह सके, और एक इंक्लूसिव मुआशरा वो होता है जिसमें फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन भी है, समाजी इंक्लूजन या सोशल इंक्लूजन भी है, पॉलिटिकल इंक्लूजन भी है। तो इफ़ वी आर ऑल क्रिएटिंग एन इंक्लूसिव सोसाइटी, तो फिर उसमें ये फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन के सारे जो स्टेप्स हैं, ग्रांट्स हैं, ज़कात है, इंटरेस्ट फ्री लोन है, प्रॉफिट एंड लॉस शेयरिंग के बेसिस पर लोन है, कोलेटरलाइज्ड लोन्स हैं, तो ये एक कंटिन्यूम बनता है, एक हल्का दर हल्का, कड़ी दर कड़ी एक जंजीर है, मुख्तलिफ स्ट्रेटजीज या हिकमत अमली हैं जो किसी भी मुआशरे को खूबसूरत बना सकती। तो पहली तो मेरी यही दरख्वास्त है कि बेनज़ीर इनकम सपोर्ट प्रोग्राम को भिखारियों का प्रोग्राम नहीं समझें, ये एक फ़र्ज़ की अदायगी है, ये उन लोगों का हक है। आप सुन के हैरान होंगे, मैं चंद दिन पहले एक खातून से मिला, मैंने कहा आपको ये 10-12 हज़ार रुपये मिल रहे हैं तो आप क्या करेंगी? तो उस औरत ने कहा कि मैं आज घर जाऊंगी तो सबसे पहले मीठे चावल पका के अपने बेटे को खिलाऊं। तो अपने दिल पे हाथ रख के सोचिए कि हम तो हर रोज़ मीठे चावल खा सकते हैं, उसको 3 महीने के बाद मिलते हैं। और फिर उसने कहा कि मेरे बच्चे खुशी से झूम उठते हैं जब मैं ये पैसे लेके घर जाती हूँ, क्योंकि वो कहते हैं कि पहले हमें एक दिन छोड़ के खाना मिलता था, अब हर रोज़ खाना मिलेगा। और वो इकोनॉमिकली एक्टिव नहीं है, वो कोई काम नहीं कर सकती। 37 लाख ऐसे घराने हैं पाकिस्तान में विच आर हेडेड बाय विडोज, और उनके बच्चों की उम्र 1 साल से लेके 16, 17 या 18 साल तक। अब क्या हम कहें कि इनको कोई मदद ना दी जाए? वो औरत कहीं मासी बनी हुई है, कहीं आया बनी हुई है, कहीं कपास चुनती है, कहीं खेत मजदूर है, उसका बेटा कहीं छोटा बनकर किसी होटल पर बर्तन साफ कर रहा है। अब असल मसला ये है कि ये जो यतीम बच्चे हैं, कम से कम 16 लाख बच्चे ऐसे हैं जो 14 से 18 साल की उम्र के हैं, और इन बेवाओं के बच्चे हैं, वो विडोज फैमिलीज के। क्या हम उनको तरबियत नहीं दे सकते, हुनर नहीं दे सकते, स्किल नहीं दे सकते? ये टेफ्टा, ये नेफ्टेक, ये पीवीटीसी, तो उनमें से एक एक बच्चे को हम अगर स्किल दे दें और स्किल के बाद फिर कुछ थोड़ी सी उसको माइक्रो फाइनेंस मिल जाए, तो क्या यही ग्रेजुएशन का रास्ता नहीं बनता? पाकिस्तान की एक और डिवीजन भी है, पास जिसे कहते हैं, पॉवर्टी एलिविएशन एंड सोशल सिक्योरिटी। बिस्प वाले कहते हैं कि ग्रेजुएशन उनकी जिम्मेदारी है। अब ये अलग-अलग से टर्फ्स बनी हुई हैं, अलग-अलग से डोमेन्स बनी हुई हैं, और हमारी फहम और फरासत तमाम की तमाम उसी टर्फ की निगहबानी में सर्फ हो जाती। पाकिस्तान माइक्रो फाइनेंस नेटवर्क एक अहम तरीन एपेक्स इंस्टीट्यूशन है जिसमें 20 माइक्रो फाइनेंस अदारे, जिनका काम ही एंटरप्रेन्योरियल डेवलपमेंट है, एंटरप्राइज डेवलपमेंट है, पॉवर्टी एलिविएशन है। तो मेरी कोशिश ये होगी कि किसी एक नुक्ते पे हम इकट्ठे हों। ये एक घंटा घर है गुर्बत। फैसलाबाद अगर आप कभी गए हों तो उसके 8 दरवाजे, 8 उसके बाजार हैं। तो यूँ समझिए कि हर बाजार दरअसल اس غربت کے خاتمہ کی ایک حکمت عملی ہے. اگر یہ سب ایک جگہ پر مرتکز ہوں گے تو شاید غربت عجائب گھر کی زینت بن جائے. تو مجھے محسن صاحب کہہ رہے تھے, ڈاکٹر راشد بھی کہہ رہے تھے کہ جی بے نظیر انکم سپورٹ پروگرام کو کس طریقے سے ہم منسلک کریں مائکرو فائنانس کے ساتھ. تو یہ الحمدللہ میں ایبسلوٹلی اسی انداز میں سوچتا ہوں. تو انشاءاللہ جو 471 ارب روپے ہے اس سال, یہ میرے آنے سے پہلے کی بات ہے, 1 ارب روپے رکھا گیا گریجویشن کے لیے. اب یہ اونٹ کے منہ میں زیرہ ہے, یا پھر یہ کہہ لیں کہ سمندر سے ملے پیاسے کو شبنم, بخیلی ہے یہ رزاقی نہیں ہے. اب اگر آپ نے ایگزٹ اسٹریٹجی بنانی ہے, 471 روپے آپ دے رہے ہیں, وہ میں نے مان لیا ہے کہ وہ تو حق ہے ان کا, لیکن 10-20 ارب روپے اگر رکھے جائیں اور پھر وہ ایک سینرجی کریٹ ہو, تو بہرحال یہ وہ کچھ منتشر سی سوچیں ہیں جو میں پچھلے بہت دنوں سے, کیونکہ میں سمجھتا ہوں کہ میں بے نظیر انکم سپورٹ پروگرام کو کم آنسریبل ہوں, اس خوبصورت حال میں بیٹھے ہوئے لوگوں کو زیادہ آنسریبل ہوں, کیونکہ عمر گزری ہے اسی دشت کی سیاحی میں. تو میری اصل جو ہے, جو میرا دل کہتا ہے وہ تو یہی ہے کہ کسی شخص کو اپنے پاؤں پہ کھڑا ہونے کے لیے کاروبار کی طرف راغب کیا جائے, تاکہ وہ خود بھی پروڈکٹیو شہری بنے اور قومی پیداوار میں بھی اضافہ کا باعث بنے. تو میں اس انشاءاللہ تعالی کوشش کا وعدہ کر سکتا ہوں, کیونکہ بہت سے یہاں پر مختلف قسم کے سوچ اور فکر رکھنے والے لوگ ہیں جو کسی اور کے خوبصورت تصور کو محض اس لیے اپنانے سے گریزاں ہیں کہ یہ ان کی انا پر ایک بوجھ بن جائے گا. بدقسمتی ایک یہ بھی ہے کہ ہم اپنی انا کے اسیر ہیں. ہم سمجھتے ہیں کہ ہم عقل کل ہیں, اور جو ہم سمجھتے ہیں وہی سچ ہے, وہی حقیقت ہے, حالانکہ حقیقت کہیں اور بھی ہو سکتی ہے. تو کھلا ذہن, کھلا دل, اور مجھے یقین ہے کہ انشاءاللہ تعالی جب بے نظیر انکم سپورٹ پروگرام کے لوگوں کو میں آپ کے پاس لے کر آؤں گا, آپ سے ڈائیلاگ کروں گے, ایک انگیجمنٹ, ایک باہمی اتفاق عمل, کیونکہ اگر ہمارا الٹیمیٹ, ہماری منزل یا ہماری سوچ اس شخص کی یا اس عورت کی بہتری ہے جو کسی دور دراز بستی میں منتظر بیٹھی ہے, اس سورج کی جس کی کرنیں اس کے بچے کو جہالت سے نکال کے روشنی کی طرف لائیں گی, تو پھر ہمیں مل کے کام کرنا پڑے گا. وہ چاہے سپورٹ پروگرام ہو, چاہے گریجویشن ہو, چاہے پاورٹی ایلیویشن ہو, چاہے اسکل امپارٹنگ ہو, یا لیبر فورس کی فیسیلیٹیشن ہو, کچھ بھی ہو. بہت ساری جارگنز استعمال ہوتے ہیں, لیکن حاصل کلام یہی ہے کہ وہی جو حبیب جالب نے کہا کہ وہ جس کی روشنی کچے گھروں تک بھی پہنچتی ہے, نہ وہ سورج نکلتا ہے نہ اپنے دن بدلتے. تو سورج کی تلاش میں, اچھے دنوں کی تلاش میں کچھ لوگ ہماری راہ تک رہے ہیں. تو انشاءاللہ تعالی محسن صاحب آپ کے ساتھ مل کے, باقی جو ہمارے معزز دوست بیٹھے ہوئے ہیں, ان کے تجربے سے آپ کہیں گے تو ہم پرائم منسٹر کو بھی لے کر آئیں گے, ہم جس بھی مقتدر ہستی کے ہاتھ میں ہماری قسمت کی ڈور ہے اس کو لے آئیں گے, اور پھر ہم بتائیں گے کہ کس طرح سے سب یہ جو تسبیح کے چھوٹے چھوٹے دانے ہیں ان کو جوڑ کر ہی تسبیح بنتے ہیں. اپنی علیحدہ حیثیت میں تو کوئی کچھ بھی نہیں ہے. تو اس ملک سے وفا کا تقاضا, اس غریب سے محبت اور ہمدردی کا تقاضا, اور اس خستہ حال عورت سے جو بغیر جوتے کے 6 گھنٹے میں نے عورتوں کو کھڑے ہوئے دیکھا, لائن لگے ہوئے سخت دھوپ میں, کہ میرا نام بے نظیر انکم سپورٹ پروگرام لینے والوں کی فہرست میں لکھا جائے. نہ جانے اس کو وہ پیسے ملیں گے یا نہیں ملیں گے، لیکن صرف فہرست میں نام لکھوانے کے لیے یہ غربت کی شدت اتنی زیادہ ہے. بعض اوقات ہمیں خود بھی احساس نہیں ہوتا، کیونکہ ہم دیکھ دیکھ کر ہمارا دل اتنا کٹھور ہو گیا ہے کہ ہمیں واقعتاً اس گندگی کے پیچھے، اس غربت کے پیچھے، اس افلاس کے پیچھے جو دکھ ہے اس کی خبر نہیں ہوتی. تو میں ماحول کو زیادہ سنجیدہ نہیں کرنا چاہتا. اور بھی دکھ ہیں زمانے میں محبت کے سوا، اور بھی بہت ساری چیزیں کہنے کے لیے ہیں. آخر میں یہی کہوں گا کہ امید اور یقین. یہ بھی میں نے تاریخ کی کتاب میں پڑھا کہ کوئی بھی معاشرہ، کوئی بھی سماج غربت کی وجہ سے زوال آشنا نہیں ہوتا، امید کے نہ ہونے سے ہوتا ہے، یقین کے نہ ہونے سے ہوتا ہے. اور ہماری بدقسمتی یہ ہے کہ دیدہ و دانستہ یا نادانستہ ہمارے دوست ہم سے ہر روز امید چھین لیتے ہیں. ہر روز شام کو بعض اوقات ٹی وی کے سامنے بیٹھیں تو پتہ چلتا ہے، یہ خدشہ سا آپ کو اپنے حصار میں لیتا ہے کہ پتہ نہیں کل کا سورج طلوع ہوگا یا نہیں ہوگا. تو میرے نزدیک نا امیدی کفر ہے، کیونکہ جو شخص امید نہیں رکھتا وہ خدا کے وجود سے انکار کرتا ہے. تو اسی امید میں ہم زندہ ہیں، اور آپ بھی اسی امید کا مظہر ہیں. آپ نے بھی شکست تسلیم نہیں کی، آپ نے بھی ہار نہیں مانی. آپ بھی ہمہ وقت یہی کہتے ہیں کہ ہم اس وقت تک کام کرتے رہیں گے جب تک یہ دھرتی گل و گلزار نہیں ہوگی، یہاں پر پھول نہیں ہوں گے، خوشبو نہیں ہوگی، مہک نہیں ہوگی. اور ہر بچہ، 2 کروڑ بچے اسکول نہیں جاتے، لیکن یہ عزم صمیم تو ہے نا کہ ہر بچے کو اسکول لے کر آنا ہے. تو راستے مختلف ہیں تھوڑے تھوڑے. بے نظیر انکم سپورٹ پروگرام ایک سپورٹ پرووائڈ کرتا ہے کچھ لوگوں کو. زندگی کی غربت کی جو شدت اور تلخیوں کی جو اتنا ایک انبار ہے، کوہ گرہ ہے، اس کو کم کرتا ہے. آپ اس کو زندگی میں آگے بڑھنے کا راستہ دکھاتے ہیں کہ انٹرپرینوریل جرنی شروع کرو. یہ مائکرو ہے، پھر تم اسمال پہ پہنچو گے، پھر تم میڈیم پہ پہنچو گے، پھر تم کمرشل پہ پہنچو گے، پھر تم شاید کارپوریٹ پہ بھی چلے جاؤ. میں نے بیسیوں نہیں سینکڑوں ایسے لوگوں کو دیکھا ہے جنہوں نے فٹ پاتھ سے اپنی زندگی کا سفر شروع کیا. وہ شوگر مل اور ٹیکسٹائل ملوں کے مالک ہیں. تو غربت سے نکلنا، اس کے لیے بس ایک جستجو چاہیے اور ایک انوائرمنٹ بھی چاہیے، انیبلنگ انوائرمنٹ، جس میں ریاست کا بھی کردار ہے، آپ کا بھی کردار ہے، میرا بھی کردار ہے. تو بہت شکریہ. آئی وش کہ انشاءاللہ تعالیٰ جو خواب آپ نے دیکھے ہیں، جو خواب میں دیکھتا ہوں، وہ ایک روز ضرور پورے ہوں گے. کسی نے کہا تھا کہ جو خواب کسی کے لیے دیکھے جائیں وہ ضرور پورے ہوتے ہیں. اور کسی صوفی کی ایک بات جاتے جاتے کہتا جاؤں کہ اس سے کسی نے پوچھا کہ میں خوش رہنا چاہتا ہوں، کوئی راستہ تو بتاؤ. اس نے کہا کہ کسی شخص کو خوش کر دو، خوشی خود ہی تمہارے پاس چلی آئے گی. تو آئیے ہم سب کسی ایک شخص کو، کسی ایک گھرانے کو خوش کریں. اس کی مسکراہٹیں یقیناً لوٹ کے ہمارے گھر کے آنگن میں بھی آئیں گی، ہم بھی خوش ہوں گے. بہت شکریہ.
Thank you so much, Mr. Saqib Saab, आपकी इस एड्रेस के लिए. I think we have the tech working for us now. Andrew, could you please just say something so we are certain? Yes, we can hear you finally. Thank you so much. So we're just going to have Andrew talk about the programming that ADB is doing in Pakistan. So over to you, Andrew.
Many thanks, and apologies for the technical trouble. No, it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm Andrew McCartney. I lead our team that covers Pakistan. I'm also the team leader for what I'll be talking about in a moment, the Women Inclusive Finance Program of ADB. Just a few perspectives before I talk specifically about our program. Many of the themes you'll have touched on over the last 48 hours. ADB has been part of Pakistan's microfinance journey all the way back into the early 2000s with some of the original microfinance regulation coming in. And obviously we've seen tremendous growth and the robustness that the industry came through with COVID just showed you how robust this was. However, we do believe now that the industry in Pakistan is at a crossroads, and we believe that there is an economic imperative now more than ever to seriously scale up the outreach in the sector. I mean, with poverty rate rising, much of that in rural areas, microfinance is critical to turning that trend around. Equally, the climate shocks we've seen with the floods have demonstrated how important microfinance is for building up resilience. And what we've also seen from the impact studies is as much as 60% of those clients impacted were actually micro clients with a lot of these flood events. But meanwhile, the gender gap grows. Whatever metric you use, there is this growing divide, which I'm sure you've talked about over the last day or so. So what needs to happen? So the first thing is obvious, really, in terms of scaling up funding. We did an initial litmus test a few weeks ago, which showed just against the current need in the microfinance sector is somewhere between 500 to 700 million shortfall in funding today to meet their business targets. And here really, this is really where we need a combination of government funding, the IFIs such as ourselves and the World Bank, as well as the private sector to be coming together and pooling our resources to actually help scale up the industry. Also reaching out to the capital markets. Kashif recently. You can't hear? We can hear, yes. You can. Okay. Then just a couple of other points around, we've got a lot of the fundamentals on digital, but we still need to leverage that a lot more to get the outreach, particularly when we look at the branchless banking, the agent networks, etc. Then we've got climate, and the need to build climate literacy is now fully integrated really within the whole financial inclusion agenda, whether it be from a regulatory perspective, the industry perspective, and also our micro clients need to adapt and mitigate a lot of these climate risks. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen across a number of areas. When it comes to the women, we recently did a study in conjunction with the SME Development Authority on what the potential opportunity was. And what we've seen was that nearly over 20 million women, potential micro businesses, currently do not have access to finance. Many of these are informal, and many of these are home-based. As much as 10 to 12 million are home-based. But this is not a small business opportunity. So what is ADB doing? Well, what we are in the process of doing right now is about to launch what we call our Women Inclusive Finance Program, which is going up for our board approval in early December, which is actually why I'm here in Manila right now and not with you in that conference. Now, the program is worth about $300 million. And it is in two phases over 2 years, and there will be 100 million in credit line for financing of women micro entrepreneurs. There will also be a guarantee component as well. as well as a strong policy reform agenda and policy lending component, where we attempt to address a lot of the supply and demand issues, working closely with our implementation partners such as SBP, SECP, Ministry of Industries and Production, etc. So we are launching this, we hope, in December, and we very much, we hope to reach it well in excess of 2 to 2.5 million women through this program, with the help of the industry. So we look forward to your collaboration. Yes, I think that's enough for me, other than to say thank you on behalf of ADB to PMN and the PMN team for putting on such an excellent conference and inviting us to speak and co-sponsor. So many thanks from ADB.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you for sharing the details of the program. We look forward to it being implemented. I'll now move on to the last agenda for today. I'd like to call upon the stage Mr. Murtaza Khokar, who is the Vice Chairman of PMN, for a word of thanks. Mr. Khokar is the founder of the RCDS and the RCDP. He is the CEO there. He is dedicated to financial inclusion in Pakistan, and he sits on many diverse boards. Without much further ado, Murtaza Sahab, I'd like to call you here to do the word of thanks. Thank you.
Respectable Chief Guest, Dr. Amjad Saqib Saab, Guest of the Honors, stakeholders, participants, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, Assalamu alaikum. After the successful execution of this conference, I extended my heartfelt thanks to each and everyone who have contributed their inputs, their resources, their knowledge in the conference. First and foremost, our sincere gratitude goes to our honorable guest, investor, and other stakeholders. I mean CEO of banks, microfinance bank CEOs, investors, speakers, panelists, and sponsors. All the sessions were full of with knowledge, skill, and expertise by the speaker and the panelist. This credit goes to all stakeholders. I mean, especially investors and sponsors, their supports to success this conference. I would also like to appreciate the team of PMN because they are hardworking, and behind the scenes their sports is very valuable. Last 2-3 years, we're facing very crucial times in the microfinance industry because the Pakistani political crisis, disasters, and other things affect to microfinance industry. After this conference creates the positive and productive impact on our microfinance industry. My hope in this coming year, inshallah, we will create a positive and productive impact on our microfinance industry. Again, thanks to all stakeholders, and congratulations to Motion and their team on the success of this conference. Thank you very much.
just like you say. Thank you so much, Murtaza साहब. Murtaza साहब, मैं request करूँगी कि आप please जो है मोमेंटो हमारी तरफ से हमारे ऑनरेबल चीफ गेस्ट साहब को दे दें. अमजद साकिब साहब, अगर आप प्लीज़ स्टेज पे आ सकते हैं for a short token from the Pakistan Microfinance Network. Murtaza साहब ने इनको देना है, आप उनको. Thank you so much, Amjad Saqib साहब. अहमद साहब, मैं ऑल्सो रिक्वेस्ट करूँगी कि आप मोहसिन को एक मोमेंटो PMN की ऑर्गेनाइजिंग कमेटी की तरफ से दे दें फॉर ऑल द एफर्ट दैट हैज़ बीन पुट इनटू द कॉन्फ्रेंस. And I'd request Jandeep Khan Sahab to please come on the stage to give a memento from the PMN to the Vice Chair for from us. नहीं, ये Jandeep साहब देंगे इनको. ये Jandeep साहब आपको दे रहे हैं.
We would also like to present a token of appreciation to Zainab Saeed for being an extremely engaging master of ceremony. If Murtaza Sahab, if you can please come on stage and present the memento to her.
Thank you, everybody, for your participation and your attendance. We'd like to now officially close today's session and officially close the AMC-7. We request you to join us for tea outside. The tea is sponsored by Asia Insurance. Thank you to all the sponsors. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to all the guests who've attended. We have taken feedback, and we will come back with a bigger bang next year with AMC-8. Thank you.